was an ancient tradition in the village of Tanwo for fathers to publicly profess their love and affection towards their daughter. It also allowed them to marry their daughters as second wives with the consent of the mother. In situations whereby the mother disagrees, both the mother and daughter would have to fight for the husband. The fight was usually considered a joyous event in the village. Since some mothers find it disgusting to share their husband with their daughter, such mothers would go into the dark forest in search of the powerful wizard who would make a charm for them to overpower their daughters. In exchange for the power, the mother would hand their daughter over to the wizard as wife. These daughters were charmed and then dragged to the wizard. There was once a man that showed interest in his eldest daughter. It was rumored that both father and daughter had been secretly meeting behind closed doors at odd hours without the knowledge of the mother. When the mother discovered it, she called for a fight, but this clever daughter faked an apology. She went to her mother, crying and begging for forgiveness. Her mother thought it was genuine and forgave her. The daughter then prepared her mother's favorite meal and added poison to her meal just to marry her father. She killed her own mother, married her father, and gave birth to 4 kids. The village had no opposition to her acts since it was tradition. That was many years ago when it was still a tradition. But with time, some elders termed it as an abomination for fathers to marry their daughters and thus made a decree. Anyone that was caught in the act of making his daughter a woman would be sent into the evil forest full of callous and merciless spirits. That way, the tradition became history which people found hard to believe. Despite the fact that it was against the rules of the land, a man called Banji took advantage and taking his 15-year-old daughter, Casey, as a wife. Banji was an average family man with 4 farmlands where he planted yams, plantain, cocoa, and cocoyam. He married his wife at the age of 19. He saw his wife at the village fair and immediately fell for her. It was love at first sight for both of them, and they wasted no time in getting married and having their first child. After their 3rd child, which was Casey, Banji decided not to have another child. He loved Casey dearly, and he always carried her with him everywhere. Casey became his right hand instead of her elder brothers. He would often take her into his hut and play with her. Her laughter would always vibrate all around the house. His unsuspecting wife thought it was father and daughter bonding. Since she was the only girl she gave him, she never had a second thought about his intentions. When Casey was 6 years old, Banji took her to the edge of the evil forest. He knew it was a place children dreaded because they've heard countless horrifying stories about the evil forest. "Father, let's go back! It's the evil forest!" Casey cried out and made an attempt to run. Banji knew she was going to run, so he caught her and held her in his arms. "Father is here, my dear. You don't have to be scared of anything. I am with you," he replied. "But mother said there are bad spirits here and they will eat us alive. What are we doing here?" "I don't want to be eaten," she said innocently. "I want to tell you a story. No evil spirit will harm you. Remember, the evil spirits are my friends. I know them all," he replied. "Really? But I'm still very scared," she said as she buried her face in her father's broad chest. "Listen to my story and you won't be scared. There was once a little girl just like you. Her father told her to do something for him, but she refused. Do you know what the father did?" he asked. "No." "Tell me, father." She spoke. The father took her to the evil forest and fed her to the bad spirits. He said with a smile as his daughter held him tight, "Father, I will do everything you say. Don't leave with the bad spirits. Mother will be very lonely and sad if I don't come home." She said, "Good girl. You're smart," he said, then stopped walking. "If you don't want the bad spirits to eat you, then promise to become my wife," he said with seriousness. Casey laughed and laughed till tears rolled down her face. She thought he was merely joking until she saw his face. "But mother is your wife. When I grow up like mother, I will marry someone I love," she replied. "And don't you love me, Casey? Don't you love your father? Or you want to remain with the bad spirits?" He threatened. "Please, father, I promise. I won't tell mother either. I promise," she spoke. Banji smiled after he accomplished his mission of successfully manipulating his daughter into making a promise. "One more thing. Remove everything on you. I want to see your skin," he commanded. With fear, Casey obeyed her father. One after the other, she took everything off until she was stark naked. With his evil intentions, Banji took advantage of his 6-year-old daughter. Little Casey cried with her all strength as her dearly beloved father took her innocence. After he was done, he took her to the nearby stream and cleaned her. "Listen to me. If you don't want your mother and brothers to be eaten by the masquerade and the bad spirits, don't tell anyone what happened. You hear?" Banji said before proceeding home. Once they were home, Casey ran to her mother, which was quite unusual. For days, Casey refused to go into her father's hut for fear of what might happen to her in her mother's absence. One afternoon, Casey was sleeping in her mother's hut after a brief illness when her father came to her. "Casey, my young wife," Banji called softly. On hearing her father's deep voice, she jumped with fear written all over her face. "Don't be scared. It's your father." "Father, where's mother?" she asked. "She went to get some things in the market and won't be back in 2 hours. You have not been coming to my hut, my dear. Why?" He asked. Casey merely stared without answering her father. "You see this gun in my hand? I know how to use it well. If you don't want me to use it on you or your mother, you have to sleep in my hut tonight," he said and left. As soon as it was night, filled with the fear of losing her mother, Casey cried to her mother, "Mother, mother, I want to go to my father. I want to sleep in his hut. You are not well. You can sleep in his hut once you are okay." Her mother pleaded, but Casey remained adamant. She rolled on the floor and cried for her father. Immediately, Banji heard Casey crying. He came out of his hut and demanded an explanation. He then scolded his wife for not bringing his daughter to his hut. "You should have allowed her to come. Now, her temperature is high again due to the tears," he howled. "Don't mind your mother. Sorry, my precious girl, come here," Banji said to Cassie, who slowly dragged her legs to her father. Once everyone was asleep, Banji took his daughter into his chamber, threw her on the bamboo bed before proceeding with his evil acts. Casey sobbed quietly, but could not call for help because she didn't want her mother to die. Secretly, Banji continued to take advantage of his daughter till she reached her puberty stage. Although she knew better, still Casey feared for her mother and brothers. She was scared of what her father would do if she exposed him. One evening, Banji called his wife to discuss an important matter. "My dear wife, you've been a supportive and caring woman since I married you. This is why I want to inform you of my decisions before taking the big step. I want to marry a second wife," he confessed. "A second wife? Am I not good enough for you? What do you want after 3 healthy and beautiful children? You want more kids? Ah, Banji, a second wife at this stage?" she cried at the top of her voice. Seeing that she would not agree easily, Banji closed the chapter of a new wife until something happened. It's been 2 years since Cassie started seeing her monthly period. Unfortunately, after an intimate affair with her father 2 months earlier, she missed her period. Her body started experiencing changes due to the child in her womb. Her mother saw her throwing up frequently and often rejecting meals. She then questioned her about her lover. "My daughter, you are old enough to marry. I am not against you and your lover. Just tell me who he is so we can visit his parents very soon." "Mother," Casey said before weeping profusely. She summoned courage and told her mother the real truth about her pregnancy. Unable to believe her ears, she dragged her daughter to the king's palace with tears running down her face like streams. She made Casey narrate her ordeal all over again to the king and his chiefs. By the time she ended her story, they were all astonished and disappointed. Their faces fell as they looked at the helpless daughter. "Bring that evil man here right away," the king ordered his guards. 2 hefty guards went to Banji in his farm and seized him up without hesitation. A crowd of villagers followed Banji to the palace as they all wanted to know what had happened. "What sort of abomination have you committed? If you desperately wanted a second wife, why didn't you get someone else instead of your daughter?" the king asked. "I have loved her since she was a child. I had no better option of expressing my love to her. I also saw nothing wrong in what I've done. It was once our tradition for fathers to marry their daughters if they wish." Banji responded without feeling guilty. "What a shameless man. You ruined your daughter's life and you called it love?" one of the chiefs replied in disgust. "The deed has been done. My people, it was once a tradition and now he will have to marry his daughter, since no man will want to marry a lady that has been used over and over by her father. No family will allow such a lady in their home. You have no other choice than to marry her," the king commanded. "I will marry her. I have no problem with it," Banji said without thinking of his wife. In anger, his wife left the palace, packed some of her things, and left the village with a broken heart. Banji married his own daughter against her will. Casey was confused and merely cried all through the ceremony. Determined to make her father pay for all he did, Casey went to the back of the house after the ceremony and hung herself on the tree. It was one of the villagers that saw her body dangling from the tree. Everyone blamed Banji for his wife's departure and daughter's death. One after another, they cursed him with loneliness before they left him. His sons buried their sister and left their father all alone. A few days later, Banji was found dead in his chamber. He died as a loner without anyone by his side. As a result of his terrible end, men with evil feelings for their daughters turned a new leaf and carried out their responsibilities as a father, not a lover.